During September of 2001, I attended an estate sale in Portland, Oregon. The items liquidated at this sale were from the estate of a woman who had passed away at the age of 103. A granddaughter of the woman had told me that her grandmother had been born in Poland, where she grew up, married, raised a family, and lived until she was sent to a Nazi concentration camp during the Second World War. She was the only member of her family who survived the camp. Her parents, brothers, a sister, husband, and 2 sons and a daughter were killed. She survived the camp by escaping with some other prisoners and somehow made her way to Spain, where she lived until the end of the war. I was told that she acquired a small wine cabinet listed here from Spain, and it was one of the only 3 items that she had brought with her when she migrated to the US. The other 2 items were a steamer trunk and a sewing box. I purchased the wine cabinet along with the sewing box and some other furniture at the estate sale. After the sale, I was approached by the woman's granddaughter, who said, "I see you have the Dibbuk box." She was referring to the wine cabinet. I asked her what a Dibbuk box was, and she told me that when she was growing up, her grandmother had always kept the wine cabinet in her sewing room. It was always shut and set in a place that was out of reach. The grandmother always called it the Dibbuk box. When the girl asked the grandmother what was inside, her grandmother spat 3 times through her fingers and said, "A Dibbuk and Kislem." Grandmother went to tell the girl that the wine cabinet was never, ever to be opened. The granddaughter had told me that her grandmother wanted to be buried with the box. However, as such a request is contrary to the rules of an Orthodox judicial burial, the grandmother's request had not been honored. I asked the granddaughter what a Dibbuk was and Kislem were, but she didn't know. I asked if she would like to open it with me. She didn't want to open it, as her grandmother had been very emphatic and serious when she instructed her not to do so, and regardless of reason, she wanted to honor her grandmother's request. I finally ended up offering to let her keep what seemed to me to be a sentimental keepsake. At that point, she was very insistent and said, No, you bought it. I explained that I didn't want the money back, and that it would make me feel better to do what I thought was an act of kindness. She then became somewhat upset. Looking back at it now, the way she became upset was just plain odd. She raised her voice to me and said, "You bought it, you made the deal." When I tried to speak, she yelled, "We don't want it." She began to cry. She asked me to leave. And quickly and quietly, I walked away. I wrote the whole episode off as stress and grief she must have been feeling, so I took my purchases and politely left. At the time I bought the cabinet, I owned a small furniture furnishing business. I took the cabinet to the store and put it in the basement of my workshop, where I intended to refurbish it and give it as a gift to my mother. I didn't think anything more about it. I opened my shop for the day and went out to run some errands, leaving the young woman who did my sales for me in charge. After about half an hour, I got a call on my cell. The call was from my salesperson. She was absolutely hysterical and screaming that someone was in my workshop, breaking glass and swearing. Furthermore, the intruder had locked the iron security gates and the emergency exit, and she couldn't get out. As I told her to call the police, my cell battery went dead. I hit speeds of 100 miles an hour to get back to the shop. When I arrived, I found the gates locked. I went inside to find my employee on the floor in the corner of the office, sobbing hysterically. I ran to the basement and went downstairs. At the bottom of the stairs, I was hit with an overwhelming and unmistakable odor of cat urine. Keep in mind, there had been no animals kept or found in my shop. The lights didn't work. As I investigated, I found that the reason the lights didn't work also explained the sounds of glass breaking. All the bulbs in the basement were broken. All 9 of my bulbs had been broken in their sockets, and 10-foot floor fluorescent tubes were laying shattered on the floor. I did not, however, find an intruder. I'd also like to add that there was only one entrance to the basement. It would be impossible for anyone to leave without meeting me head-on. I went back up to speak with my salesperson, but she left. She never returned to work after having worked with me for about 2 years. She refuses to discuss the incident to this day. I never thought of relating the events that day to having anything to do with the cabinet. Then, things got worse. As I already indicated, I had decided to give the cabinet to my mother as a birthday gift. About 2 weeks after I made the purchase, I decided to go and start refurnishing it. To my surprise, I found that the cabinet was a unique little mechanism for the door. When you open one of the doors, the mechanism causes the opposite door and the little drawer below to open at the same time. It's very well made. Inside the cabinet, I found the following items: 1 1928 US wheat penny, 1 1925 US wheat penny, one small lock of blonde hair, bound with string, one small lock of black and brown hair, bound with string, one small granite statue engraved and gilded with Hebrew letters. I've been told that the letters spell out the word Shalom, one dyed rosebud, one golden wine cup, and one very strange black cast iron candlestick holder with octopus legs. I saved all the items in the box and decided to return them to the estate. The family refused the items, so I decided I'd keep them anyway. After opening the cabinet, I decided not to refinish it. I cleaned it and rubbed some lemon oil. It was at this time that I noticed that there was an inscription in Hebrew carved in the back of the cabinet. I have no idea what it says or if it's even significant. On Mother's Day, October 28, 2001, my mother called to tell me that she was going out of town with my sister for roughly 3 days, and thus we postponed celebrating her birthday together until she returned. On October 31st, 2001, my mother came to the shop. We were going to have lunch together, but before we could leave, I gave her the wine cabinet. She seemed to like it. While she examined it, I had to make a phone call. I hadn't been out of sight for more than 5 minutes when one of my employees came running into my office saying something was wrong with my mom. I immediately dropped the phone call and went to see what the matter was. I found my mom sitting in a chair beside the cabinet. Her face had no expression, but tears were streaming down her cheeks. No matter how hard I tried to get her to respond, she wouldn't. She couldn't. As it turns out, my mother had suffered a stroke. She was taken to the hospital by the ambulance. She ended up suffering partial paralysis, and she lost her ability to speak and form words. She could of course understand things being said to her, and could respond by pointing to letters of the alphabet to spell out words she wanted to say. When asked her how she was the following day, she teared up and spelled out the words, "No gift." I assured her that I had given her a gift, thinking that she didn't remember. But she became even more upset and spelled out the words, "Hate gift." I laughed and told her not to worry about it. I told her I was sorry she didn't like the cabinet, and that I'd get her anything she wanted if she promised to get better. Still, I don't associate anything that happened with the cabinet itself or anything paranormal. Frankly, I didn't even use the word paranormal until last month. I'll try to make this short now. I gave the cabinet to my sister. She kept it for about a week, then gave it back. She complained that the cabinet doors wouldn't stay closed and that they kept opening. There was no springs in the door mechanism, so I have no idea how they came open. I gave it to my brother and his wife, who kept it for about 3 days and gave it back. My brother said it smelled like jasmine flowers, while his wife insisted that it smelled of cat urine. I gave it to my girlfriend, who asked me to sell it the day after. I sold it the same day to a nice middle-aged couple. About 3 days later, when I came back to the shop, I found the cabinet sitting at my front door with a note that read, "This has a bad darkness." I had no idea what that meant. Anyway, I ended up taking it home. Then, things got even worse. Since the day I brought it home, I began having these strange recurring nightmares. Every time I see the same horrible dream, and it goes like this. I find myself walking with a friend, usually someone I know very well and trust. At some point in the dream, I found myself looking to the eyes of the person that I'm with. And it's then that I realize that there's something very different, something very wrong and evil looking back at me. At this point in the dream, the person that I'm with changes into something I can only describe as the most gruesome, demonic-looking hag I've ever seen. This hag then proceeds to beat the living tar out of me. I've awoken numerous times to find bruises and marks on myself where I'd been hit by the old woman during the previous night. I still never related the nightmares to the cabinet, nor do I think I would ever have. About a month ago, however, my sister and my brother and his wife came over to my house and spent the night. The following morning during breakfast, my sister complained that she had a horrible nightmare. She said she recalled having it a couple times before, and went to describe the nightmare exactly to the last detail. My brother and his wife both froze as they listened. And as it turns out, they had the exact same dreams. The hair was standing up on the back of my neck. As we talked about it, it became clear that the common denominator was that each of us had had a nightmare during the times that the cabinet was in our respective homes. I called my girlfriend to ask if she had recalled having any nightmares recently. She described the same nightmare, same hag, everything. When I asked her if she remembered the date that it had been given, then I asked her if it was when I gave her the cabinet. And she said, "Yeah. Hey, how did you know that?" Now then, since my family discussion, it seems that all hell was breaking loose. For about a week afterwards, I started seeing what I can only describe as shadows and other things in my peripheral vision. In fact, numerous visitors to my house claim they've seen things in the shadow move. I put the cabinet outside in an outside storage unit, and I was awakened to the sound of the smoke alarm. When I went to see what was burning, I opened the door and didn't see any smoke, or flames for that matter. However, I did get hit with the smell of cat urine. When I went back inside, the smell was in my entire house. I do not own a cat, and I never have. I went back outside and grabbed the cabinet. I brought it back inside and tried to research it on the internet. While I was surfing the net, I fell asleep and once again had the same freaking nightmare. I woke up at around 4:30 or so to find that my house now smelled like jasmine flowers, and just in time to see a huge shadow thing looping down the hallway from me. I would destroy this thing in a second, except I really don't understand what it is that I'm dealing with. I'm afraid, and I do mean afraid, that if I destroy this cabinet, whatever seems to have come with the cabinet might just stay with me here.